Once again, good evening. Thank you so much for coming out this evening. My name is Victoria Bañales. I'm English faculty here at Cabrillo College, and I'm also the co-convener for Cabrillo's Hispanic Affairs Council. So it's my pleasure and privilege to welcome you today to the Together We Dream Community Forum. And I want to turn it over to our facilitators, Rocio Preciado and Rodrigo Dorador, educators for fair consideration.
We're beyond honored to be here in Watsonville for the second time today to present around an issue that's not talked about enough, I think, and that's about how to realize the dreams of undocumented youth here in the U.S. My name is Rodrigo Dorador, and I'm the outreach manager at Educators for Fair Consideration. We're a San Francisco-based nonprofit whose mission is to empower undocumented young people pursue their dreams of college, career, and citizenship. I myself am an undocumented immigrant, and I need some water. And I've been doing this work since I graduated from high school. I've been a community advocate since 2008, so it's been about 6.5 years, and now I'm really, really amazed and blessed to have the opportunity to do this at a professional level, managing a team of outreach ambassadors, which is one of the parts of E4FC's programming. Today we have some of our interns who are presenting in the other rooms, and they're all UC Santa Cruz students who are AB 540. Yearly, our program does around 300 presentations a year all over the Bay Area. We have 22 outreach ambassadors that do work all the way as far north as Sacramento, Napa, and Santa Rosa, and as far down south here in Watsonville, all the way from the ocean to Merced County. So we're spread all around the Bay Area, making sure that undocumented young people, their parents, and their educators know how to best support them and advocate for them in the community. In addition, we have two other programs. Our legal services team that I'll be sharing more about. The gist of our program for legal services is to offer online, free, anonymous case analysis for undocumented young people ages 14 to 35 who want to find out whether or not they have a legal pathway to becoming U.S. citizens. We also have a policy advocacy team that advocates for issues that are affecting the undocumented community. And this year, or last year, we were able to pass a few very significant bills, and this year we're pursuing to advocate a third issue. Last year we were able to pass a GPA bill that would make sure that all students, regardless of their immigration status, would get automatically uploaded to the California Student Aid Commission's system so that everybody could automatically have that information for their California DREAM Act application. In addition, we were able to pass a career licensing bill that will allow anyone in the state of California to apply for any career licenses regardless of their immigration status. And finally, this year we're really fighting to make sure that the Health for All bill passes the California Congress this year, and everyone in California can have access to health care regardless of their immigration status. Those are the three programs, and that's what E4FC does. When I let me see. There we go. When I was in high school, educators played such a huge role in my ability to go to college. And specifically, one educator really supported me in feeling safe and in making sure that I knew that I could get to college even though I didn't know all the details or the nuts and bolts of it all. In fact, her name is Deborah Kaufman. She was my English 4 AP. My AP English 4 teacher, and the first day of my senior year, I went into school. I was going into the hall. It was this carpeted hallway with a ton of doors and students just whizzing by me, and I felt a little bit lost and sleepy since it was the first day of school. But then I felt a tug at my shoulder, and I turned around, and it was a teacher. Oh my God, am I in trouble? Hi, Rodrigo. Are you Rodrigo? Yes. Oh, it's so nice to meet you. I'm Deborah Kaufman, and I'm going to be your AP English 4 teacher. I've heard a lot about you, and I'm really excited that you're going to be in my class. Oh, okay, thank you. And I walked away. But that made an impression on me. I kept an eye on Miss Kaufman throughout the rest of the year because she came and introduced herself to me. Usually I thought I had to be the one that introduced myself to the educator, but when she came to me, it made me feel like really safe and really held. Throughout the year, we kept getting closer, and at one point she learned, for better or for worse, my nickname at the high school, which, because of my last name, I think that's why, it's because of my last name, Dorador, was Dora the Explorer. So that was my nickname in high school. And in the classroom, we'd be reading Shakespeare, and Miss Kaufman would go, Dora, that's a great comment on that sonnet, line number 12. Thank you so much. Dora, great insight. And we just kind of kept getting along that way throughout the year and getting closer and closer. And when it got closer to applying to colleges, there was this question that came up on the application: do you have a social security number? And that's when I kind of got stumped, and I said, I don't know. And I hadn't told a soul that I was undocumented, so I decided, well, Miss Kaufman has been so far the friendliest, most accessible teacher that I've had. I'm going to go up to her and let her know about my situation. So one Friday, I went up to her classroom, I knocked on the door, come in. I walk in and she's typing away emails on a Friday after school. And Miss Kaufman, I have to tell you something. Okay, Dora, what is it? No, Miss Kaufman, this is really, really important. I have to tell you something. Okay, Dora, what do you need to tell me? And I had no idea what she was going to tell me, but what she ended up telling me is the key thing every undocumented student needs to hear. I told her, Miss Kaufman, and I started to break down and cry because I'd never told anyone. And I told her, Miss Kaufman, I don't have papers. I'm undocumented. And as I started to break down, Miss Kaufman said, oh, Dora, don't you worry. We are going to find a way. And that made all the difference for me. And that is the key thing every undocumented student needs to know. That someone has their back, that there is a way, that there is a pathway to becoming a U.S. citizen, to becoming a college graduate, to becoming a professional in this country. And that has made the difference for me as well. Even if I hadn't had the ability to go to college, just the fact that someone had my back was enough for me to know that I was going to succeed, regardless of what I did. Today, what I'd like to do is I'd like to do three things. First of all is talk a little bit about what is the conversation around immigration at the national level. What is the information out in the community? What's the myth? What are facts? What are rumors? To address two types of policies, to talk about immigration policies and educational policies affecting undocumented youth. And finally, to give a few best practices for how to best support undocumented students in the classroom, at the campus level, at the department level, at the community level. There is, for example, really two pretty prominent, really pervasive themes in U.S. society around immigration. The first one that I want to touch on is the myth that most immigrants cross the border illegally. There's this idea that when we turn on Fox News, CNN, ABC, CBS, whatever network is on television, 90% of the images that we see about undocumented immigrants is people running across the border with the little green light, the infrared light, trying to capture people. And those are the images about who immigrants are in the US. Overwhelmingly, 90% of the images that we see in the media portray undocumented immigrants in that light. When in fact, out of all immigrants in 1 year to the US, 50% come with a pathway to become legal US citizens. Another 25% come with a pathway directly to becoming legal permanent residents, which equates to becoming a green card holder. Or they come with a visa that eventually leads to legal permanent residency. Finally, the last 25% are undocumented. But even then, half of those immigrants, so 12.5% of those folks come with a visa, but they come with a temporary visa that doesn't allow them to become legal permanent residents later on. So they come with a visa, the system does not allow them, or the laws do not allow them to renew it, and then they become undocumented once their visa expires. And then the other 12.5% are the folks that you'll see on the news who are crossing the border by foot, by car, who are crossing through the checkpoint. And the image is usually of a male in 18 to 35 who's crossing and coming to work a low-skill job. But in fact, I myself am one of those immigrants that crossed the border without authorization and came without a visa. I'm from Tepic, Nayarit, Mexico. It's a state where it's a tropical weather. There's amazing mangoes. That's my favorite fruit. And I came when I was 9 years old, crossed through the Nogales checkpoint using a cousin's ID who looked like me. And that's kind of an image that kind of goes against what the image that the media portrays around undocumented immigrants. I wanted to show an image as well of what is the immigration system look like today. And this is by far the simplest image that I could find to kind of describe what our immigration system looks like. And this only talks about 4 of the ways people can legalize. There's dozens of ways. If you can see, the top blue path is for folks who have a spouse or a child over 21 who is a U.S. citizen. Those individuals who have that family connection to the U.S. can go on and become U.S. citizens, and the process will take approximately anywhere from 6 to 20 years. The second pathway is for folks who have green card holders who are a spouse or a child over 21. If they have that connection to the U.S., then they can come to the U.S., become legal permanent residents, then apply for citizenship. And that process could take anywhere from 10 to 28 years. Why does it take so long? In our immigration system, there is a quota system. So every country in the world has a allotted amount of space for people who can come into the U.S. per year. The quotas are so low that in the Philippines, in Mexico, and South Korea, the government is currently processing applications from the 1990s. So there's folks who are in the Philippines right now submitted their application in 1995, and they're barely getting to them. So our immigration system is backlogged 20 years. And so a lot of the immigration advocates are calling for an immigration system that creates a faster way for people to come to the U.S. And then the third way, or the third way at the bottom, is for folks who have a special skill. And special skill, as defined by immigration policy, is you're either David Beckham or Bono from U2. And the other factor is, and it literally says it when you look at the immigration policy in writing, you come with the intention to directly inject over $1 million into the U.S. economy. So those are the 4 main ways that people can come into the U.S. If you don't have a spouse, a child, a special ability, or $1 million, then there is no pathway to becoming a U.S. citizen here in this country. And so you get a bunch of people that are undocumented like me, and there's 3 categories for folks who are undocumented. The first one's entered without authorization. Hi. The second one is folks that entered with a visa and overstayed that visa, thus they become undocumented. And then there are folks who are currently in the process, they have a pending application, but are in the U.S. and are waiting for 15 plus years till their case gets analyzed. Nationally, there's around 11 million undocumented immigrants. The majority come from Mexico, but there are notable populations from the Philippines, India, and Korea that have made the U.S. their home. The second myth is that undocumented immigrants are a drain on the economy. And this is a really prevalent myth, especially in the news. You'll hear that immigrants come and take jobs away, they depress wages, etc., when in fact, immigrants come to become entrepreneurs, and when you look at all the different types that immigrants versus native born individuals contribute to the economy, what you see is that native born populations will fill in the middle skilled, middle income jobs in the US, and then immigrants are brought in to fill the low skill, low income base of the spectrum in the economy and the very highly specialized areas of knowledge. And that's how you get engineers, professors, a lot of entrepreneurs. I think the Silicon Valley is a great example of that type of high skill, high knowledge type of capacity that immigrants bring to the US, since a lot of startups like Apple, Google have been started by immigrants. In terms of undocumented immigrants, yearly the community pays $90 to $180 billion in taxes per year. But since folks don't have a social security number and don't have the ability to access federal benefits, they don't get any benefits from the federal government. So they're putting into the system 90 to 180 billion, but are getting back, at most, the most optimistic estimates is that folks are getting back 5 billion. So you see there that there is a huge benefit that undocumented immigrants provide to the economy, and they're not, and the community is not receiving any benefits back. In a study that was done by the Congressional Budget Office, which advises the executive branch and the legislative branch of the US federal government, they found that if immigration reform was passed today, in the next 10 years, the direct impact of undocumented immigrants would be an increase of 1% in our gross domestic product. In addition, everyone's income in this room in the next 10 years would increase directly by the contributions of undocumented immigrants by $1,700 a year. Wouldn't that be nice? Most impressively for me is the fact that if we were to pass immigration reform, our $14 trillion deficit would be reduced by around 20%, or $2.7 trillion in the next 10 years. Seems unbelievable, right? Why is that possible? The reason is that the immigrants that come are not being used at their fullest potential. Take, for example, my mom. My mom right now is probably at home, probably just finished dinner, washing the dishes, and she just got home from a long day work at the dry cleaners. So she irons clothes for a living, and that's what she does, and she earns around $300 a week. She lives in Phoenix, Arizona. That's where I grew up. Came to college over here, and that's how the world sees my mom. They see her as like, oh, okay, she is this woman in public who's undocumented, so she goes and works what she can, which is a low-skill job. She goes to the dry cleaners. But when she gets home, my sister, my dad, and I know her real potential. My mother came to the US to reunite with my dad after he left Mexico for losing a job, for failing to conspire in, oh my God, what's the word? I'm losing my English today. In corruption, there we go. So my dad didn't want to be in on a corrupt deal in the company he worked, lost a job, couldn't find one, came to the US. My mom then wanted the family together, and we had to come to the US, and my mom had to sacrifice a lot to come and work at dry cleaning, because my mom actually graduated from one of Mexico's top universities, La Universidad Nacional Autónoma de México, which is comparable to the MIT or Harvard of the United States, with a degree in chemical engineering. Yet because she is undocumented, she cannot enforce that degree here in the US. And we as a country lose out on the contributions she could make in a country where we are in desperate need of intelligent people in the STEM field, especially engineers. And so that is why this type of this economic analysis I think is believable, because immigrants are here and they have so much to give, but the current system is not allowing immigrants to give to their fullest potential. So where are we? So those are the myths of immigration, and that's kind of what immigrants can provide to the economy. So why hasn't immigration reform happened? There's plenty of reasons. I want to just give a really brief overview of some of the highlights around the moments where we have been close as a country to passing immigration reform. I want to start in 2001 when the Federal Dream Act is introduced in the Senate of the US. And then the term dreamers, that's when the term dreamers first became a thing. And dreamer students became a thing. So from 2001 to 2006, there wasn't many undocumented students or dreamers who were willing to publicly come out. So the bill didn't pass because there wasn't enough support, and there was only a few senators who were backing the bill. In 2006, there was a bill proposed in Congress that would criminalize, it would make it a felony to be undocumented or harbored an undocumented immigrant in the US. So that means if you're a parent, an undocumented parent of a US citizen, if you are a teacher teaching undocumented students, you would have been a felon. And in response, millions of people came out to the immigration marches in 2006 wearing white. Do folks remember that? When people just crowded, show of hands, crowded Chicago, New York, LA, Watsonville. So people responded pretty impressively to this attack on our community. And that's when a lot of dreamers started to become more active. And that's when I think about going back to high school, that's when a lot of us, we were talking through this online forum. It's called the Dream Act portal, dap.net. And we were all, didn't know each other, but we were all talking on online media, trying to figure out what can we do, what can we not do. And as we started to connect over the internet, we found out that if we operated in numbers and we organized, we couldn't get deported. So then we started to mount a lot of actions for the Dream Act, because that was the narrative at the time of US history that worked and that appealed to the general public. The dreamer who came by no fault of their own was very appealing to the American public. So in 2010, we got really close to passing the Federal Dream Act. It passed the House, and in the Senate, we lost by 5 votes. So the Dream Act didn't pass. 2 years after that, the movement kind of came back, and we found out that John Lennon actually had been granted what's called deferred action in the 1970s when he was put in deportation proceedings, but his lawyer found the loophole. Well, not a loophole, it's actually constitutional. The president, through his executive action, constitutional authority, can have discretion over who is deported and who is not. So John Lennon was the first person ever to get deferred action, and in 2012 we used that case study to build a case for deferred action for childhood arrivals. And that's how we get the new program called DACA, and it impacts students who would have been eligible for the Dream Act. After that, after the momentum built, it became really apparent that undocumented students and dreamers weren't doing and contributing on their own. It's actually behind us are our parents. And our parents are also supporting us. They're the ones telling us to keep going, to go to school, to become professionals. And that story came into the narrative of the immigration history. And then in 2013, there was a moment, we call it the CIR moment, the Comprehensive Immigration Reform moment, when the Senate passed an immigration reform bill that would legalize the 11 million undocumented immigrants. But in the House, it was stalled. So there were some people who were advocating against the bill. And the bill stalled, and it died in 2013 because the session ended. So then the Dream movement, the Dreamers, who have continued to press Obama and say, can you give deferred action to our parents now? And so that's how in 2014 there was the announcement for DAPA, which is called Deferred Action for Parents of Americans, which gives deferred action to people who are parents of US citizens or legal permanent residents. As of February 16, as of last Monday, there was a lawsuit filed, and there has been an injunction on that program, so it hasn't moved forward. And I'll go now more into the details of what's going on. So this is the big overview. This is what happened in the last 15 years. In 2012, deferred action was established, and it gave benefits of work authorization and protection from deportation for 2 years, and it's renewable every 2 years. And folks can get a federal photo ID, a social security number for work purposes, a driver's license, and a lot more benefits. On our website, there's stickers here, and there's some materials. On our website, folks can access a guide called Got DACA, Now What?, which is an overview of all the different state benefits that undocumented youth who qualify for DACA get. And these are the eligibility criteria. They're a lot like the DREAM, the Federal DREAM Act. Eligibility, folks have to have come before the age of 16, been here without lawful status by that date, continuously resided in the U.S. since June 15, 2007. That's a typo. So 2007, there's an age cap for folks, so that exists. Folks have to have gone to school, been honorably discharged from the armed forces, have a pretty clean criminal record, and been present on June 15 when the announcement was made. What deferred action is not, it's not the DREAM Act, it's not the Federal DREAM Act, it's not a legal immigration status either, it's actually a protective status. It doesn't offer a pathway to citizenship, it is a temporary status that is renewable every 2 years. It's like the government saying, we promise for 2 years, renewably, that we're gonna be giving you a work authorization and we won't deport you. So that's what it kind of looks like. The process to apply is folks have to collect documents to prove all the different eligibility criteria, complete forms, mail the forms along with the fee of $465. Attend, once they receive a notice, they attend and get their fingerprints taken at a biometrics appointment, and then they wait 3 to 6 months to be able to hear back. In total, there was around 1.7 million to 2.1 million out of the 11 million that were said would qualify for the program. To this date, about 700,000 have applied, which is a little bit less than 50%. But the good news and the goodness is that the application, the acceptance rate for deferred action has been 98%. So most folks do get accepted into the program. However, there are some red flags. If folks have any of these red flags, gang involvement, if they've been deported in the past, it doesn't mean that they won't qualify. It just means that they need to seek legal expertise. And there are some resources that we have for that. In addition to we have some resources on paper, on the internet. So this is steps to prepare for DACA. So every 2 years, folks have to renew. So there's a process for renewal. We have a guide around that. We have a step-by-step on how to apply for the first time, etc. It's all on our website. In terms of legal services here in Watsonville, there's SCIP, the Santa Cruz County Immigration Program, and they offer free or low-cost legal services to undocumented young people. And what they'll do is they'll help folks understand what DACA is, the risks for applying, if they have any red flags, and then they'll help them fill out the application and send it off. At E4FC, we also have our own case analysis that's online and anonymous. We have step-by-step guides, an educator toolkit, and the Got DACA Now What. One of the major challenges to folks applying for deferred action has been paying the fee of $465. So there are a few loan programs that help students make affordable payments so that they can end up applying to the program. One of them is the Mission Asset Fund, which is based out of San Francisco. It's still, folks from Watsonville in this area are still eligible. They just got to drive up to San Francisco once to get involved in that program. And then a more local resource would be the Community Trust Dreamer Loan. That's another option for folks who need financial assistance. And then in November 14, there was a new executive action. There was another announcement that expanded the deferred action. So it created this new program called DAPA. Here are the eligibility criteria. In addition to supporting this new population of parents, it was also going to expand the deportation protection and work permit to 3 years. So it would be renewable every 3 years, which would make it way more affordable for folks to pay because 2 years go by like that. And it expanded DACA. So there's what's now called DACA Plus, and it basically removed the age cap, so folks over 31 could apply now, and it changed the date so that folks could have come at a later time, because there's a lot of folks that didn't qualify because they came 2009, 2008, so they didn't meet that first 2007 deadline. Unfortunately, it's been put into a court injunction, and there's been a lot of fear in our community about what this means. There was a lot of excitement because DAPA was going to affect 3.7 to 4.4 million people, and there was a lot of excitement around parents being able to finally get a work permit, work, fully contribute to the economy. But anti-immigrant advocates this year decided that they wanted to continue to stall this process, and they strategically picked the most anti-immigrant judge in the US, and that's where they went to file the lawsuit. So where we are at this point is that judge ordered an injunction. So the Department of Justice is going to appeal, and in terms of the timeline, it could take anywhere from 3 months to a year for the immigrant community to hear a response as to whether the injunction will be removed or not. When USCIS released a memo around the injunction, the very first statement said, "We oppose this decision, and we're going to fight to make sure that the injunction is removed as fast as possible." So right now the Department of Justice has filed for emergency action on the injunction, which means that in the next 2 weeks the injunction could be removed. So we're waiting for that, and we're really optimistic that that this is going to be lifted in the next 2 weeks, and if not, in 3 years to a month. For folks, as they start to, since we're so optimistic, we're still letting folks know that they should prepare. Regardless, they should be aware of fraud. There's going to be folks in the community saying, if you give me $1,000, like, I'll get you through this new DAPA program, like, don't believe what's on the news, etc., etc. So it's important that they beware of fraud and know to go and listen to trusted sources of information, save money for the $465 application fee, collect the documents needed to prove that they've been here in the US, connect with legal service providers like Skip, and then stay informed. Here are a bunch of websites that folks can use to stay informed. There's Admin Relief, NILF.org, United We Dream, and then there is our E4FC Dreamer intake service for parents who are 14 to 34. They can go and use the Dreamer intake service to get an analysis of their case. The important thing for folks filling out the Dreamer intake service is that we don't just analyze for deferred action and DAPA. We take a whole holistic view at people's case, so we see whether or not they qualify for any pathways to citizenship. What we found, we've analyzed around 1,500 cases nationwide, and we found that about 33% of immigrants actually qualify for a pathway to legal citizenship that they didn't know about. And the reason they didn't know about it is because attorneys cost too much. So we're able to do this for free, and then we refer them to attorneys who could potentially file an application to legalize for them. And so that's where we're at in terms of immigration and what's happening now. And that's what immigration is about. Now I'd like to introduce Rocio Preciado, who will share with you a little bit more about the education policy affecting undocumented youth in the state.
Like Rodrigo mentioned, my name is Rocio Preciado, and I graduated from UC Santa Cruz 2 years ago with a degree in feminist studies and psychology, and I'm currently the outreach coordinator at E4FC. And my pathway to college and to graduate from college was somewhat rocky at the very beginning. I graduated in 2009 from a charter school in Oakland, and the reason why I say it was a little rocky was because I came into the United States without documentation. So I was undocumented, and the reason why my parents decided to come to the United States was because my mother experienced domestic violence from my father back in Mexico. I came to the United States along with my mom, my dad, and my younger sister, and my parents' goal and idea and dream was to keep my sister and I away from that negative environment of domestic violence, where my father used to be an alcoholic, and their solution to get my sister and I away from their environment was to shift their environment and come to the United States. I came to the United States at the age of 9, and when I came to the United States, I knew that I was undocumented. I always knew that I was undocumented, and that the way that I had come into the United States was without proper documentation. Now, when I came to the United States, one of the things that my parents always said to me was, never tell anyone that you're undocumented. Don't tell anyone, because if you ever tell the wrong person, that could mean that they could probably call immigration on us. And to me, that meant if I were to ever get deported along with my parents, that meant going back into that lifestyle that we used to have. Now, fortunately, my parents' relationship had a very big shift. So that difficulty and the struggle of domestic violence just did go away here in the United States. But now, as a family, we were facing a new challenge. Now, my fear was not experiencing that violence, but it was the fear of being deported. My parents always encouraged me to tell my friends that I was born in LA. Now, it was very interesting to me because throughout high school, middle school, I always told my friends that I was born in LA. Now, sometimes I'm wondering, they probably had doubts because I did not know how to speak English, and that was one of the things that I had to deal with, assimilating to the new language, learning a new language, and finding those educators at school that were going to support me in that process. Now, it came down to 2009, my senior year of high school, when I had to now apply to colleges and universities. As an undocumented person, I had to believe that there was no way I could ever afford college or that I could ever get accepted into a college or university because of my immigration status. Then there was also the question of if I were to ever go to college and graduate, I do not have a social security number, there's no way that I could potentially work. Now that investment will not pay off. Fortunately, now throughout that time, I remember that I never had the opportunity to tell not even my best friend that I was undocumented. And until one day, an educator, his name was Mr. Schultz, I was in my economics class, and Mr. Schultz comes into the room. He's this counselor, tall African-American man, very serious, the type of counselor that just get things done, go straight to the point. He goes into the classroom and he has a conversation with my economics teacher, Mr. Spalding. And all of a sudden he approaches me and then he just says, "Come with me." So there I am following him down the hallway, and I'm wondering, am I in trouble? What happened? He's not saying anything. I'm just there like following him, his big steps, trying to catch up to him. He opens up the door to the computer lab, and I go in and I see 5 other students sitting in a circle. And I see them and I'm still trying to figure out, like, am I in trouble? Like, what's happening? Like, is something wrong? I see them and my first response to myself was, well, these students are good students. They're not usually in trouble, so I don't think I'm in trouble. I don't think this is anything bad. He says, take a seat. I joined the circle and we're just there like looking at each other very awkwardly. None of us know why we're there. Now this school was around 400 to 500 students. It was a charter school and it went from 6th grade all the way through 12th grade. Now the people that I was sitting with were classmates that I had shared classes with ever since 6th grade. Now my senior year in high school, I knew their families, they knew me. They did not know that I was undocumented. I did not know any of them were undocumented. I did not know who were the undocumented students in my school. That was not something talked about. And there goes Mr. Schultz. Later on walks this very friendly white lady, and she joins. She has this really big smile. She joins the circle, and then she says, she introduces herself, and then she says, "I'm here to tell you all about the resources for undocumented students." At that moment, I did not know what my response would have been. I was a little scared. I was like, wow, like now my classmates that believe that I was born in LA know that I'm undocumented. And then I also found out that there were other undocumented students like myself within that school. That educator, Mr. Schultz, had no idea did not know how to support undocumented students. But yet, he was able to reach out to other sources outside of school to be able to connect people to the resources and to the right information. And this is why we're here at E4FC, to provide you with that general information so that you know that there is a place like E4FC, Dreamweavers, other organizations here at Cabrillo that you can reach out to and that might be able to have these answers to those students and to be that referral to students. And luckily, I was able to have the opportunity to go through a K through 12 education and graduate from high school here in the United States being undocumented. And this is thanks to Player versus Doe, which prohibits states from denying a K through 12 education to undocumented students. Now I wondered, why was it that it was possible for me to be a high achiever in high school, but then be restricted from going into college? And that is because it was left to the discretion of the universities and states to decide whether undocumented students were to be accepted into the universities. One of the biggest challenges was being able to have access to resources. Luckily, California has been one of the states that has been able to take some steps in moving forward to providing resources to undocumented students, but there are states who are not supporters of undocumented students, who either ban or restrict enrollment into their public universities. Some of them do not have financial aid available for them. And this diagram illustrates that every state is at a different stage, at a different level. And we're hoping that here in California we become a role model and that we can expand all of these resources to other states. Because like Rodrigo mentioned, our population is very diverse and we have an undocumented population in different states as well. Now, approximately 2.5 million, there are approximately 2.5 million undocumented young people in the United States. 80,000 become 18 years of age each year, which states that some of them are graduating from high school, attending high school. 65,000 of them graduate from high school each year. 5 to 10% of them enroll in college each year. And only 1 to 3% of them graduate from college. And I was one of those 1 to 3% that was able to graduate. And I was one of those 5 to 10% that was able to enroll into a university, regardless of the different obstacles that existed in 2009. In 2009, there was no such thing as a California Dream Act. Now, what the California Dream Act is it provides access to institutional scholarship and state-based financial aid here in California for AB 540 undocumented students. And unfortunately, there are many people in our communities that are not aware that there is now state financial aid available to undocumented students. There are people who have a misunderstanding of what the resources are and what they're eligible for. Like Rodrigo mentioned, he was going through Deferred Action for Childhood Arrivals, which was announced in 2012. Very closely to the year when the California Dream Act passed and was announced and came into effect, which was in 2011, and then the second part in 2012 when it was implemented. That led to a lot of confusion as to what the California Dream Act is and what deferred action is. The opportunities that I've had to present to parents, students, and oftentimes educators, I had the opportunity to ask them whether they know the difference between the California Dream Act and deferred action. And people in our community are confused about what each of those things are. And I would like to point out that the California Dream Act is a California law that grants state financial aid to undocumented students that meet AB 540 criteria. It does not offer a work permit, and it does not offer protection from deportation. And then we have Deferred Action for Childhood Arrivals, DACA. Like Rodrigo mentioned, it's a federal program. It does not provide state financial aid. It does provide a work authorization, and it does provide a protection from deportation. And there might be students that qualify for one program and might not qualify for the other. There's people that might qualify for both programs, and there's people that might not qualify for neither one of them. And that's because both programs have their own individual requirements. They're two separate programs, they both have their individual requirements. Now, the California DREAM Act was something that I had to let my parents know about when I was applying for it. My senior year of college, my winter quarter, when I had 2 quarters left from graduating. And this was something completely new to my parents. They had no idea why I was asking them to provide me their tax information. And many people in our communities do have fear of filling out this type of applications and forms, especially when students are undocumented and their parents might be undocumented as well. And it's very important to let the community know and to inform them that there is no need to provide a social security number, to include your country of citizenship, and that all of the information is confidential. Like I mentioned, the California DREAM Act was passed in 2 different parts. The first part was implemented in 2011, which was AB 130, and this grants the institutions the discretion to provide private financial aid to undocumented students. And that was a lot of the financial aid that a lot of undocumented students in 2011, when they were graduating, were relying on. That meant, because this was implemented in January, there were many students who had doubts about whether should I go to college or not, because for my first quarter I won't be receiving any state financial aid. I'll have to wait for AB 131 to be implemented in January 2012. So there were a lot of questions that people were having about attending college, and now, because of the California DREAM Act, there is a big number of students and a lot of interest in attending college and universities. Oftentimes the question that students have is whether they're eligible for the California DREAM Act. And it is very important to understand or to have an idea of what the eligibility requirements are, and to encourage students to find out about this eligibility, because this can really avoid the confusion of whether they need to have or qualify for deferred action or for a completely different program that is not the California DREAM Act. So the requirements for the California DREAM Act are to qualify under AB 540, and I will explain the requirements in a moment. To be undocumented, have deferred action for childhood arrivals, or the U visa. Now, what the U visa is, it's something that my family members have. And the U visa, what it does is it grants people who have been victims of a felony, of a crime here in the United States, it grants them a visa that will then give them a pathway to legalize their status and to become permanent legal residents and eventually become citizens. And people also need to, similar to the FAFSA application, they do need to meet the deadline of March 2nd. So the deadline is approaching. So it's really important to remind people to fill out their DREAM applications and to let people know about this information. They also need to successfully submit a non-Social Security GPA verification form, which is often submitted by the school, by the high school they're attending. And males need to register to the Selective Service. Now, thankfully, CSAC has been really working in making sure that this process becomes a little bit more easy and more accessible to students. And they've actually included a little box where now undocumented students can register for the Selective Service through the California DREAM application. And It used to be that the way the process worked was that undocumented students, because they were not able to register via internet, they had to go to the post office, get a little card, and fill it out, mail it out, and then wait for their proof that they had registered and return that into their financial aid office. So now the process has become a little bit easier and more accessible for students, where now they have to select the little boxes within their California Dream application. The other requirement is that students must be enrolled in college or university at least half-time, part-time, and they need to meet specific program requirements, so making sure that students stay updated and know what their requirements are for their particular institutions that they're attending. And the criteria to qualify for AB 540 is that students must attend a California school between K through 12 for 3 or more years, complete at least 3 years of high school credit. They need to graduate from a California high school or obtain the equivalent of a GED. And they need to file an affidavit which states that they will legalize their status as soon as they're eligible to do so. And these requirements can get a little complicated. So they need to attend a California K through 12 school for 3 or more years. And I think this is where it gets a little complicated. They need to complete at least 3 years of high school credit. Now, students have the opportunity, for example, like if a student was living here in California and attended 2nd grade here in California, but then either they move into another state or they left to another country, something happened that they were no longer a student here in California, but then decided to come back their junior year and then their senior year, they meet the first criteria, which is attend a California K through 12 school for 3 or more years. Then the other requirement is that they need to complete at least 3 years of high school credit. Now, if the student was in high school for 2 years, they need to make sure that they complete those high school credits that are equivalent to 3 years. So it takes away the presence of being in a high school for 3 years. Like I mentioned, the California Dream Act does have the option for students to sign up for the selective service, and it's definitely made the process a lot easier. And one of the biggest challenges was that there were students who were filling out their California Dream Acts and they were submitting it by the deadline, but they were sometimes not meeting certain requirements to be able to receive their aid. And this was one of the difficulties that students were having, that they were not sure how to sign up for the selective service, where to go and sign up for the selective service. So this has definitely made the process a little bit more easier for students. Now, as different policies have changed to benefit undocumented students, there's also an opportunity for students to be able to qualify for the Dream Loan Program, also known as the SEAL Act, and this will benefit students who are attending UCs or CSUs, and it is a program that is to be implemented by the universities. And students also have the option to select whether they want to participate in this program. Now, the big value in this program is that undocumented students still have a financial gap when they're attending college, even after they've received state financial aid, university grants. And currently, I can speak from like the UC Santa Cruz perspective, is that some students are coming in and there's still like approximately like a 10,000 gap of self-help, because students who are undocumented are not able to qualify for work-study, Pell Grant, loan programs. And that's when a lot of undocumented students still need to continue applying for scholarships, to be able to fill in those gaps, to be able to live on campus. And right now, the advice for students who might not have had the opportunity to apply to as many scholarships, or who do not receive that many scholarships, the big advice is to make sure that students are finding affordable housing. Because one of the things is that the highest cost of attending a university, first of all, is tuition, and then comes housing. And that's why there is a big encouragement it's really important to encourage students to apply for scholarships and to find affordable housing. And I'm really proud to say that Dreamweavers is one of the things that they've done a lot of work with that, in collaboration with the EOP office at UC Santa Cruz, where they're able to connect students to affordable housing. There has been some Dreamweavers mentors who have opened up their homes to rent their homes to undocumented students at the university. And that's something that has made a big difference to the cost of attendance of many of the students. Like I mentioned, there are some steps that students do need to take after they fill out their California Dream Act, and sometimes students are not aware of that. So it's really important for students to be aware that after they submit their application, there are other steps that they do need to take to take track of their call grants, eligibility, and to make sure that their application was completed. A big advice is to stay connected to CSAC. Sometimes financial aid offices might still have questions about certain student cases, because every student case is very different. Every student's case financial situation is very different, and it's really important to reach out to CSAC and get that support for the students. We also have on our website a guide on the California Dream Act that you can all have access to by visiting e4fc.org. We have our educator guide, which walks not just educators but students through what the California Dream Act is, the requirements, and really important steps that they need to take and remember. For those who fill out the California Dream Act, some students, approximately 20% of students who fill out the California Dream Act, are selected for income verification. Now, since a lot of families are new to this application, sometimes it can be very scary for parents to find out that they are going to be verified. This can lead to a lot of questions as to, well, why am I being verified for? Does that have anything to do with my immigration status if they're undocumented? So it's really important to send the message that income verification is confidential, and people do need to show proof of their income using the official IRS tax transcript, and that they can file taxes using either a social security number or an IT number. Now, families who are interested in reporting their income taxes, they can find free help to apply for an IT number, and there is the website irs.gov that provides a lot of information about filing taxes and being able to obtain an IT number to be able to do so. Now, like I mentioned, back in 2009, one of the only things that I was able to qualify for was for in-state tuition. That was because I met AB 540 criteria. I had met the requirements of graduating from high school, but there were still many, even after the passage of AB 540 in 2001, there were still many undocumented students that were not able to qualify for in-state tuition. Today, with the new benefits of the California Dream Act, DACA, it has made our undocumented student population a lot more complicated and more diverse. So now we don't just have AB 540 students and non-AB 540 students. Now we have AB 540 students who qualify for the California Dream Act and who also qualify for deferred action. We also have AB 540 students who qualify for the California Dream Act but don't qualify for deferred action, because like I mentioned, both programs has its own individual requirements. And we also have students who don't qualify for the California Dream Act, but do qualify for deferred action, that work authorization. And then we have students who don't qualify for either one. So that leaves students at a very different situation. And you might be encountering students who might benefit for some programs, but not for others. Some students that qualify for both, some students who do not qualify for either one of them. But at the end of the day, these students do have a pathway to go to college. The pathway might look different, but there is still an opportunity for them to go to college. And in 2009, I remember when I was in my economics class, and like I mentioned, I was not aware that there was such thing as AB 540. And I remember in my economics class, we were working on our senior project. And for my senior project, I had to create a budget, and that's stating how much was going to be my cost of attendance, how much I was going to be receiving in aid. So I was working on my spreadsheet. We were working on an Excel sheet, and the teacher was walking around. And when I was working on my spreadsheet, my financial gap was this this red negative number that came up. And I remember that, I had been accepted to UC Santa Cruz. I knew that I was gonna go there. I was telling people that, I'm gonna go to UC Santa Cruz. And everybody, I had already told everyone that I was gonna go to UC Santa Cruz, even though I had only $1,600 and I had this negative red gap. And my economics teacher is walking around, and he looks at my spreadsheet, and he looks like very confused. I was the student that was taking community college classes at the same time while I was in high school. So he's looking at me, and then he's like wondering, why does your Excel sheet, why do you have like that big negative number? And in my mind, I was a little scared, because I was wondering, I was like, well, he's probably thinking that I don't know how to use that Excel sheet. And the other part of me was, should I let him think that I don't know how to use spreadsheet, or should I let him know that I am undocumented? And there was that debate as to which one would be worse. Yeah. And the teacher still was trying to understand why I had this negative number. And I said, and he said, why does your spreadsheet look like this? And then I said, oh, it's because I have to pay out-of-state tuition. I don't qualify for in-state tuition. I figured, that's probably going to give it away. Maybe he's going to be okay. Now I see why that negative number, walk away. That did not happen. I think he looked a little bit more confused, and then he said, what do you mean? And then I said, well, how can I tell him? And then I said, well, it's because I don't have a social security number. So I had to pay out-of-state tuition, and I don't qualify for in-state tuition. And then he looked at me, and he was still confused. I don't think that I gave it away. And he was wondering why didn't I have a social security number. It didn't make sense to him. So then here I go again. I was like, well, I'm pretty sure this is going to give it away. I said, well, I wasn't born here. So I don't have a social security number, so that means I had to pay out-of-state tuition. I don't qualify for in-state tuition. And then that's when it hit him. I was like, okay, I guess I give it away. He said, okay. He said, let's talk after class. I was a little scared. I was like, well, what is he thinking? Like, what's going on? Did I do something? Did I just ruin everything, like my possibility to even go to college? And I meet with him after class, and we're sitting there in his classroom, and then he says to me, I'm sitting right in front of him, and then he says to me, it's not fair that someone that is so smart does not have the opportunity to go to college because they do not have a social security number, because they can't afford it. And I figured that it was true. It was not fair for someone that had worked so hard to not have that opportunity. And his response was, I'm going to help you out. I'm going to help you out. And I trusted him. He gave me that hope. He gave me that space to hear me out and for me to explain to him my situation. He had no idea what being undocumented meant. He had no idea if there were resources, but he said to me, you know, like, I'm gonna help you out. He said that by saying that, definitely gave me hope. I went on and I was part of this after school program called College Track. And later on I found out that I was able to qualify for in-state tuition. So now I was very excited. I was like, you know, like, now I'm gonna tell my educator that I actually do qualify for AB 540, and it's 3 times less the amount that I have to pay. I had to meet with him one more time, and I go into his classroom. Once again, we're meeting after school. My mom is sitting outside waiting for me, and in my mind, he had said to me that there was a donor that was willing to support a student. And I went in and I was thinking, you know, like, if he gives me like $1,000, like, I already have like a little bit more. By that time I was already like collecting cans to like sell them, to try to save up money and afford a 9,000 tuition at UC Santa Cruz per quarter. And so I went in and then I explained to him, you know, well, that there's this AB 540 thing. He then picks up the phone and then he starts talking to Mr. Stephen Merrill. And I hear them talking, and then Mr. Spalding says, I hear him say, you know what, it turns out that it's a lot less than what we had calculated. And they end their conversation, and then he says to me, Mr. Stephen Merrill is willing to pay your 4 years at UC Santa Cruz. And that was the hope that that educator gave me. And even though he did not have all the answers, he was able to connect me to that person, to a resource, somewhere that were going to provide me that support. And currently, that is one of the ways that undocumented students who might not qualify for the California Dream Act, but do have that hope of going to college, can finance their education by sharing their stories and having access to scholarships that do not require social security numbers. So that's why it's very important that regardless of what a student qualifies for or does not qualify for, there should still be that hope that there is a possibility and that things will change. We have our scholarship list on our website, e4fc.org. And there's also other alternatives. There's IDA accounts, individual development accounts, that can be found in different counties. For every dollar a person saves, they can match it up to $2 to $3. That's another alternative. Private, community, and online sponsorship. Now with the movement, we have so many more students sharing their stories and finding out the power that their stories have. When I was going to graduate from UC Santa Cruz in 2013, I still did not have a social security number. I was not sure what I was going to do, how it was going to work, and I was at a point where I had already made a commitment to my family to move to the East Bay, to San Leandro, where I currently live. And that was my commitment to my parents. They had lived in a one-room apartment throughout the 4 years while I was at UC Santa Cruz, and I was in that situation where I was not sure whether I was going to be able to move back home, and that was my plan until I was offered to work at UC Santa Cruz as an independent contractor. And now I was in the debate whether I already have this commitment with my family where they're hoping that I will contribute to the family and support them, because now they're living at a 2-room apartment that is now more expensive and are counting on me to move over. And then I was in the situation of, if I go back, I'm going to miss this opportunity of working at UC Santa Cruz at the EOP office. And I was having this conversation with a Dreamweaver mentor. Her name is Esperanza. And it was at the very early stages of when Dreamweavers was about to start. I remember explaining this to her. She had asked me, what are your plans after graduating? I said this to her. And I was explaining to her the situation where I was in. And later on, she then invited me for lunch. And she said she wanted to invite me for lunch. Her daughter had been away. She was about to get married, and she had a room in her home, her daughter's room. And during that lunch meeting, she offered me her daughter's room for me to be able to stay without having to pay any rent. Now, that was a great support that a mentor was able to offer me, welcome me into her home and giving me that opportunity to take that offer, that job offer, to be able to continue the work as an intern at UC Santa Cruz and continue to build that connection with those mentors in the community. Now, something like that just makes a huge difference in the world. And it gave me the opportunity to do things that I didn't think I was going to be able to do. And there are so many things that everyone has mentors can do and is able to do. And I'm very happy and thankful to know that there is that collaboration with Dreamweavers and with many different community members here at Cabrillo that are there willing to support students in every way possible. Now, like I mentioned, like we've been mentioning, there are so many different policies out there that sometimes our community does get confused as to what's what. And this gives a really quick brief summary of the things that we've covered. So we've covered AB 540, which grants in-state tuition for undocumented students. One of the things that I was able to benefit in 2009. We then have the California Dream Act that grants undocumented students who meet AB 540 criteria the possibility to receive state financial aid. We then have DACA, which gives those that qualify an opportunity to have a work authorization, social security number, and protection from deportation. And currently, we're waiting to hear more about DAPA and DACA in hopes of having more members of our community benefit from this program. And we're still continuing the fight to have more long-term benefits that are very inclusive, that can be inclusive, and more of our members of our community can benefit from. I will now welcome Rodrigo once again to share with you more about acts of empowerment.
I think we've been covering this a lot in terms of the type of mindset that educators should have when they're approaching students, and what I found is that there is definitely a right mindset, and like we've been talking a lot about is there might be students that qualify for AB 540, but then they came one day too late to qualify for DACA, so they're missing out by one day. And the right mindset to have is to know that regardless of what programs students students qualify for, they can still go ahead and make it happen. And that at any time in a student's career, they have the ability to change their situation. One of the educators that definitely proves that for me is Mr. Chad Geston. He is the person on the far right of me, on the left here, with his pregnant wife Megan. He's an educator in Arizona who I met when I was in 5th grade. He was a TFA, Teach for America educator that came to a low-income school in Phoenix, Arizona, where I was a student. During one of our 5th grade math classes, he decided to give us a really hard math problem to keep us busy while he went to the office and came back to do some admin work. So when he came back, he actually found out that one of the students had figured out the problem, and that student was me. And not to brag or anything, that student was me, and he really was in shock because he told me, "How did you figure this out?" When I did this program in my graduate studies class, it took 3 of us graduate students 45 minutes to figure this problem out. It was a problem around potentiality and probability around how many combinations of different types of sandwich meals you could have. So it takes exponents, like when you do it the mathematical way, you do it with exponents and different matrices. I did a picture and I got the right answer in 2 minutes, and he saw the potential. He didn't see the stigma and the TV of what low-income students look like, what immigrants look like. He saw there is a student with a lot of academic potential, and he decided from that day to really support me and pushing me through the educational system and going to the most competitive schools in Arizona. So I was going to a school that was about to fail and be put under command through the Department of Education, and he made sure that I graduated a year early, and then he told me if I wanted to apply to the most prestigious high school in Arizona, which is a private Jesuit called Brophy, similar to like Bellarmine and St. Ignatius here in California. And he started to learn Spanish so that he could translate documents for my parents. He went and talked to the school, made sure that it was okay that I was undocumented, that there was funding. I ended up getting 80% of a scholarship to go to the high school, and the other 20% I did work study, working at the cafeteria to pay off the tuition. And right there, when we had that moment in 5th grade, that's what changed my whole career or my whole educational trajectory, because then he created a pathway for me in Arizona where there is no laws like AB 540. There's actually laws that prohibit and prevent the students from going to college. So he found a way, one way in Arizona that undocumented students go to college, go to competitive high schools, apply for private colleges, and get financial aid that way. I ended up going to a school, Santa Clara University here, about an hour north, where I got a full ride scholarship through the Hurtado scholarship that they have at Santa Clara. And we found that way, and I was the one student. And this last December I went and I had lunch with him, and over burgers in Phoenix, I told him what's going on, and he said, it's great. I mean, it's been amazing that I was able to guide you through school. You were the first one. It was hell. I was learning a new language. I was trying to figure out all these laws. I didn't know what the hell was going on. But after you, I figured it out. I mean, it took me a while to learn it, and then I figured out the biggest thing is I need to know the laws, which I learned by getting your ass through. And 2, he said I needed money. That's what students need. They just need the money to pay for school. And so he set up Sponsors for Scholars that now sponsors over a dozen students in Arizona and guides them from low-income communities in the district that he and I met to go to the most competitive private high schools in Arizona, and then they end up going to universities like Cornell, Santa Clara, Brown University. There's some students there. And so he's been able to create, from that story, he was able to create a model and a pipeline to support as many students as he had the capacity to, because he's not a billionaire, but he does know resources and sponsors. He connected with me a lot to continue and see how my journey had been going. How are you going to get a job, independent contracting, all these things. So it's really important to keep in touch with E4FC. There's a sign up going around, since we have a lot of students that are at different levels of their life trajectory, from folks that are going to medical school, law school, who are going right out of college right now, and all different aspects and pathways. So it's really important to connect students that are younger to older students so that they can have a conversation around what steps did you take to get there. Here in California, this success story of undocumented students going to college is being supported by the California Dream Act. Earlier we had talked about 7,000 to 13,000 undocumented students nationwide enrolling in college, but because of the California Dream Act, we learned that in 2013, a year after the Dream Act was implemented, 25,000 students applied for the California Dream Act, meaning that 25,000 students had the intention of going to college, which is double the national average of students enrolling in college every year. So the model of undocumented students going to college at first was really successful through scholarships, and now the state is putting money behind the students so that more and more can go, and the state can benefit from them once they get degrees. So that's another way that models are being replicated. And around the schools, or around schools and colleges here in the Bay Area and in LA and in Fresno in the Central Valley and Merced, there's different programs that are being piloted and being built for undocumented students. So a lot of models already exist. And E4FC by the end of the year is going to print out and publish a toolkit, a report of all the different models at the different universities here in California. So So you can look out for that. Another thing is to really build resilience in the students. One way is to connect them to alumni. The second thing is to know that being undocumented is a learned behavior. It is not something that people are born with. But we forget. I've certainly forgot for some time. In Arizona, when we just arrived, I was around 10 and I was the only English speaker in my family, so I had to translate for everyone. My mom was applying to a job, so we went to a dry cleaner. It was a little dark already, everybody was gone from work, it was just the boss, so we walk in there, I mean it's 120 outside, and then you walk into the dry cleaner where all the steam, so it's like 160, it's like a sweat lodge in there, and we're just like, okay, we gotta apply for this job, I'm 10 years old, I'm like, get me out of here, but I have to translate for my mom. The boss comes over, he takes my mom to the back, she does a few of the different cloth items, she comes back, and then it's the interview phase, that's where I'm supposed to shine. And my mom is counting on me, and the boss starts asking me a few questions. Oh, how are you? Who are you? I'm Rodrigo, I'm the son, yeah. I'm here to help translate for my mom. Okay, great. And I mean, the first question that I have for you is, how come your mom is looking for a new job? What's going on? And because I knew the answer and I was so innocent at 10 years old, I didn't tell my mom, I didn't translate for my mom so she could answer. I just right away said, oh, it's because it had something to do with her papers. She didn't know, and then I just felt a kick, and I was like, oh, okay, I wasn't supposed to say that, I guess. And then we went with the interview, my mom didn't get the job outside. I got the biggest scolding of my life. And that's when I learned that I shouldn't say that. Rodrigo, you're not supposed to say you're undocumented. And that's when I learned from my own mother that I was not allowed to say that I was undocumented, that there was something missing, that there was something wrong with me. And a lot of students come to college, come to high school with those ideas. We've been learning that it's wrong to be undocumented ever since we came to the US through our parents, through the government, through the media. And so it's really important to remind students that they're human beings and that being undocumented is only a stigma, it's a status that was created by the US government. When the day I learned that that was a learned behavior was a day when in the news I saw undocumented immigrants actively get themselves arrested to make a point. And that was the first time that I said, whoa, they're getting arrested, but aren't they gonna get removed from the US? And then in the news they said that actually no, because if you get enough community support on your end, you will not get deported. And when I started to learn that there was a community of other undocumented students and that, hey, we're all just human beings trying to make a living here in this geopolitical area of the world, I learned that, oh, it was a learned behavior. And so it's really powerful for students to remind them that they can still have dreams. One of the questions that I like to ask students when I first start working with them, I've been mentoring undocumented students for the past 3 years through the program that we do, and one of the questions that I like to ask them is, if tomorrow you were to wake up and you were a US citizen, what would you do? What would be your dream? And especially if you knew you couldn't fail. Just to get them to start having their imagination open, because a lot of times the undocumented status does close down our imagination, and instead of thinking about our dreams, we start thinking about what's possible based on the things we hear in our community. And a lot of times in our community, my aunts and uncles sometimes told me, work at McDonald's, you're not going to go to college. So it's really important as educators to keep students' minds open to all the possibilities and not to be discouraged by all the blocks and all the laws and all the policies and rumors that sometimes can get in the way. To connect to resources, we talked about SCIP, connect to the Mexican consulate that's nearest to here. They usually have a lot of great resources and attorneys available. Talk to scholarship foundations about opening up their scholarships to undocumented students. A lot of times scholarships have the requirement of US citizenship or even just a social security number, but they don't know why. And we know this because we've asked several foundations and they say, oh, well, we just need the social for tax recording purposes. And we say, so is an ITIN okay? Yeah, we'll take an ITIN. And sometimes it's that easy. Other times they won't budge. They will say that it is a requirement for the social to be there. We tell students apply anyway, and sometimes the scholarships change their mind after they see the application and they see amazing students that are applying. Definitely connect to college access organizations around here who might have a lot of other resources, since they're supporting students individually. Sometimes they've gone a little bit deeper through this thought process of how do I support an undocumented student. So that's great. And then find allies in other schools, in other high schools, and other community colleges. At E4C, you have an ally. To build yourself as an ally, like today, to have courageous conversations with students, different colleagues, faculty, staff, where you work, so that they can start beginning and have a conversation around how can we support undocumented students. In terms of creating a safe space for students, you can definitely make sure to have visuals in your department and your offices that say that undocumented students are welcome here. You can grab one of the posters here that says undocumented students can go to college. At the end of the presentation, create a physical space for students, whether it's a bulletin board or a private office, where they can come and just feel like I'm understood here. Like my teacher or other undocumented students, we know this is our little space, and no one else like outside needs to know what's going on. To hold events, public events, where there's awareness that's being raised around immigration. When I was in high school, my high school made every single student attend a week-long summit around immigration before immigration was an issue in Arizona. It was back in 2006. And after we all went and learned about the legal, anthropological, cultural, political, geographic issues surrounding immigration, we all felt like little experts, and we were like sophomores in high school. And one day, some of the mothers decided to protest the fact that there was a summit. So my classmates decided to hold a counter protest, and then we were building placards, and we were building all these signs. And what amazes me to this day, which is probably the most poignant and deepest analysis I've seen around what's going on with our immigration policy in the US, is there was one of my classmates who was a Canadian immigrant, came and he made a sign, and he's like, "Look, Rodrigo, look at the sign I made," to go to the counter protest. And it was a sign with the picture of a Native American, and it said, "Ask him who is undocumented." So having these events can enable students to start becoming allies and becoming advocates and educators of their own. Once we give them the information, folks just take off with it. I mean, it was amazing for me that that's still the most poignant analysis of immigration that I have to this day, and it was a 16-year-old Canadian immigrant that had attended three or four events within a week span, and he became activated almost instantly. There's also these artists that I promote, who are amazing artists that talk about immigration issues, especially around identity, and work through art to support students. And then finally, I think the biggest act of empowerment to have is to have faith in your students. One night I came home from soccer practice. It was around 9 p.m. I had to still do my Algebra 2 homework. I got to the kitchen, everything was clean. Parents and sister were already in bed. The table was clear. I turned on the light. I put down my book, my notepad, pencils, and then I realized I'm so tired. I gotta wake up at 6:30. It's an hour bus ride to school. Do I really want to do this? Why am I doing this for? Am I gonna be a U.S. citizen? And I was looking at my homework for like half an hour, not even moving. I was just sitting on the chair, and then I hear my mom get up. She comes to get some water in the kitchen, and she notices that I have this really disillusioned face. So she comes over and she goes, "What's wrong, Rodrigo? What's going on?" And I tell her, "Mom, like, this is too much. Like, I can't do this. It's already 9:30. I want to go to bed. If I do this, am I really going to be a U.S. citizen? I don't know why I should try." She kind of nodded and said, "Okay." So she sat down, and then she took a big breath. Look, Rodrigo, the reason our family came to the U.S. Is so that you and your sister could have a better education. Now, we have no idea when immigration reform is going to happen, but it is going to happen. And you need to be ready for when it does, so that when immigration reform passes, you have all the skills, you have all the diplomas, you have everything you need to just jump and take advantage of the opportunity. Okay? Okay. She went back to bed. I finished my Algebra 2 homework. Took me about 2 hours. I finally closed the book. I put it away in my backpack. I cleared the table. I turned the lights off and I went to bed. That's the type of messaging that our undocumented youth need, to have faith that something is going to happen, that something is going to work out. When I think so much about, well, one day I was sitting in my blue IKEA chair in my apartment and I was reminiscing about my grandparents who passed away, so I'll never get a chance to see them again. And then a thought just came to me. What was my mom thinking when she was in the process of deciding whether or not she was going to come to the US? Did she know I was going to meet Mr. Gueston? Did she know I was going to go to the most prestigious high school in Arizona? Did she know I was going to get a full-ride scholarship to Santa Clara University? And I don't know if she knew all the different details, but I know that when she came with the intention of making sure that my sister and I would get an education that would be worth all the sacrifices that were made for us to succeed. And to this day, that type of faith is what I see as the greatest strength in my mom, the greatest strength in our community, and the greatest strength in all of you community leaders that continue to come and get educated and get this information out to our community, because I feel like this is the biggest thing to empower our undocumented youth, is faith that something is going to happen, that we are going to have justice in our community, and that they are going to become amazing college graduates, professionals, and eventually US citizens. Thank you.